You'll forgive my smell today. I'm in the middle of a workout and God, I fucking smell. And when I work out, I spend a lot of time in my head, just thinking about things and different clients I'm working with and so forth. And there's one thing I see so frequently in a particular aspect of my work, and it needs to be dealt with. And it's significant enough that I'm expanding it from just a 1-minute video, at least here on Instagram. On TikTok, I'll condense it down into something shorter. My career arc has gone from being a pastor for many, many, many years, and technically I am still a pastor, even though I don't really do what you'd think of as official pastor things. I do pastoral counseling. That's my profession. Spiritual counseling, which has gone through all of my work, but most of my work presently is bringing that spiritual counseling to Wall Street, to politics, athletics, and the arts. People who have literally reached the top of the food chain. And they come to me either because they've gotten there and they realize all that stuff that they accomplished never filled the hole inside, or they feel like they've fallen off track, they've lost their mojo, and they come to me because they've heard through word of mouth, through their circle of friends that this guy can do some things. And I don't know if there's a scarier word among this sort of school of people than one in particular. You've heard me talk about the word selfishness among a lot of my clients. But among this group of people, the CEOs, the business owners, presidents of companies, professional athletes, and world-class musicians, they're highly driven people. They're people who very much fancy themselves as tough, strong, driven, fierce, intense. And that's part of the connection with me, is they sense that in me. And so the word that they fear the most, or certainly one of them other than poverty or failure, but there are ones even bigger than that, but the one that's really at the top of the list is the word victim. So many people in our society, so many people that I counsel won't let me bring up that word. Don't even want to discuss it. Sven, I'm not a victim. Hey man, people who are victims, it's like, fuck that shit. You got to power on, move on, get on with your life. Grow the fuck up. That was in the past. You're not a victim, move on. They really have a revulsion for that word. And as I go into their lives and the autobiography that I write, require every client to write before we even meet, so I'm fully fluent in their life before they ever darken my door, really gives me a lot to go on. So we hit the ground running right away. We're not wasting 8 fucking sessions to determine whether or not, they feel good about their relationship. I mean, my clients don't want results 2 years from now. They fucking want results in months or less. But what their autobiography and what all the questions that I pepper them with are driving towards is to understand their story. I don't care if I'm right or wrong. I tell my clients all the time, tell me if I'm wrong. I don't mind being wrong. I don't mind making mistakes. I'm just trying to understand you. And what it always goes back to, always, is that in the early years, messages, beliefs got pressed into the wet cement of their soul. And those beliefs hardened. And they had, and those may not have been consistent with who they really are. They were often taught lies about themselves, that they were bad, that they were no good, that they didn't matter. Additionally, they were often put down, treated as if they weren't wanted. All of these things contributed to a lot of pain inside these people. And so, as a way to get the approval they never got as a childhood, or as a way to avoid the disapproval and the criticism they got in childhood, they became perfect. They became uber successful, so no one could fucking criticize them, to insulate them from all that shit they had experienced as a kid. They experienced in childhood that life isn't safe. So they took the real me, put it inside a cigar box, wrapped it up in duct tape, and stuck it way down deep in motherfucking side. And they became whoever the fuck they had to become to either get approval or avoid criticism. And the thing that they can't fair to consider is that they were ever a victim. Nah, fuck that. I powered through that. That doesn't matter. And the hardest thing, one of the hardest things that they have to look at, that I force them to look at, is logically, you actually were a victim. You were a fucking child. And one or two or more people, mom, dad, or more, had power over you, older siblings, power over you. And they took advantage of that power. They used the power that they had to inflict pain. And you think naively that, gee, I'm an adult. I can just say, that's not me, and I can just move on, really. And that's, you don't think maybe that's contributing to your sense of emptiness inside? You don't think that's contributing to what's kept you running so fast, so hard, so long? So on one hand, it's been a little bit of a blessing, but you're running from that fucking pain. You are running from the actuality that you were a victim. And victim and toughness are not opposing. They're really not. They're just two more tools in the same tool belt. But what my clients rail against, I help them see, is not the realization, the logic, and the pain that they actually were a victim. No, what they're really railing against, prior to my explaining it, is the notion of then taking on the mantle of the word victim and making it their cloak, making it their identity. And that's something very different from what I'm talking about. Making victim your identity is staying in the pain, making a deliberate choice to stay in your pain. Oh, I'm a victim, and keeping that your identity. That's a whole different animal. And I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm saying with my clients, what I help them identify is that yes, you were in fact a victim. You were in fact a powerless child, and some really fucking nasty shit was done to you. And I'm not even talking about fucking physical abuse, though it's that too. Words, neglect, underlying messages, that shit presses messages into that wet cement of a child's soul, and those calcify and harden. The child grows up, spends their life hating themselves, spends their life running, all these things. You were a victim. You were a fucking child. They had the power, and they used it to harm you. I have a friend who I discovered recently has many times insulted her teenage daughter, saying things as, you look stupid, or such things. And I had to say to my friend, why would you ever say that to your daughter? What's gained by that? And she said, oh, Sven, I'm just kidding. I said, but do you realize that sticks in the kid's fucking head? Do you realize there's no fucking filter? And furthermore, if someone else, at school or whatever says, gee, you look funny today, now all of a sudden, your message coupled with that one begin to form an identity. She starts to believe it. Sven, I was just fucking kidding. Yeah, and that's what people do when they just want to fucking be lazy and hurt people, and then fucking wipe their hands of it when they're called out. I was just fucking kidding, lighten up. Yeah, but it still does pain. You're just being fucking lazy in life. But back to this notion of victim, that until that is acknowledged, until these people who are so powerful in their lives acknowledge, and they really can't deny it, the logic is there. You were, in fact, by definition, a victim. A power source greater than you exacted pain on your soul. How is that not victim? That doesn't mean you have to wear that identity for your life, but to acknowledge it in your past, to name the beast, is half the problem. As my 92-year-old mother told me a million times, Sven, remember, naming the beast is half the problem. Just naming it, finally having it out of you and seeing it, has so much cathartic power. It has the power of defanging that beast that's been inside of you. Never underestimate the power of naming something. You go to your doctor and you say, oh, my leg's been tweaking, my gums are sore, I've had a headache in the back of my head, and damn if I don't have a rash on my right ass cheek. And your doctor's like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah disease. All of a sudden, this general cluster of symptoms has now been named, and now it doesn't have the power over me because now we know what to do with it, or at least we're in the ballpark. It's the same way with the shit inside. Naming the shit, naming shit from your past will forever alter your perspective on life. It will forever change the size of that burden inside of you, relieving you of so much of the pain, or as I like to say it, not even just the burden inside, but it's like you've been carrying around a 500-pound bag of rocks on your back. And every time we name those things that happen, the pains from our past. It's like we're taking this giant fucking rock out. And I specialize in basically collecting rocks, taking rocks out of people. I've got a lovely little rock garden in my home. And the thing is, those rocks aren't heavy to me because they don't bear the emotional charge that it does for the person whose bag it was put into. So my job is to take the rocks out, or if my client so chooses, to help them take the rock and put it back where it first came from, and that's right in the lap of the parent. Of course, they'll deny it, they'll defend themselves, they'll say, oh, that's too bad, we need to move on, whatever. That's a whole separate fucking video. But the bottom line is, until you can see, give yourself permission to acknowledge and allow out the grief of the soul that comes from the identification of the fact that I was a victim of people who hurt me, the very people whose job it was to fucking love me, hurt me. And worse, or just as bad, or contributing to the problem, is that while they were pouring that pain into my love cup, at times they were pouring love into my love cup. So that has the effect in the heart and the soul of a child of normalizing pain with love, identifying love as at times painful, and that becomes normal. And so then if they get to later in life and the love doesn't have pain, they don't trust it. They don't believe in it, or they just don't ever believe it's possible. So they never encounter it. Anyway, that's some stuff on victim, that it doesn't have to be your identity, but it does have to be identified. The sources of your pain from your past, taken out of you, looked at, given words, named, and then grieving the pain that has gone with it, and then asking that pain for the gems of wisdom that it holds for moving you forward. Heavy shit to think about. So in what ways were you a victim? Even if you never say it to anyone else, at least have the balls to admit it to yourself, to speak your truth in your daily journaling. Or if you're reading the Sedona Method, which is not one of my books, but I highly recommend it. Some of you have heard me recommend it before. Are you working on the ways that you are a victim and the pain that it has caused in your life? I challenge you to do so. So, my dear friend, find it. Get the places of your life where you have been a victim. Get it out of you so that it no longer is dragging you down, so that those giant rocks are out of that burlap sack on your back. Peace to you today.